Hey there, welcome to the Breakthrough Creative. I am John McDavitt, your host, and this is the place where we talk about the business of art and the art of business. My guest today is my guest from last week, Michael Spooner, who is an animation world designer. Last week's episode, episode 79, we learned about Michael's journey into his career. This week, we are going to hear about his work specifically on the feature film Hotel Transylvania 2. He is going to begin by breaking down the differences between television animation and feature animation, how he got onto this film, working with the director, and working on a team, and then he is actually going to break down specific scenes and settings that he helped to develop in the movie. Before I hand you off to our interview, would you please subscribe to my channel if you are watching on YouTube and hit the little notification button? And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, would you please give me a 5-star rating and leave a review? All of this is helpful to make this show rise up through the algorithm that is YouTube, that is podcasting. And it's helpful, beneficial information to creatives who want to make a living from their craft. If you happen to know artists or creatives who want to make a living from what it is they do, would you please share this channel or these specific episodes with them? I'd really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you. So there you have it. All right, with my interview.
Few of the projects I worked on at Disney Television Animation in the late 80s through the early 90s. I think I
Chip and
worked,
Dale, Goof Troop, Sophia the First, Tailspin.
yeah, uh, and that's only a few. I haven't had the time to actually put much other content on that. Uh, so, but each one of those shows would last. I was on those shows for almost 2 years, working on sharing in a 2-year period, sharing designing for 64 shows, 64 episodes, and I would uh, uh, often be uh, the key designer on what of styling visual the visual language or style of the show on the front end, and then for every episode, depending on the script, they would have a lot of different locations that were uh, haven't been yet designed based on the story. So sometimes they would move around the world. So let's say Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Often they would have, uh, stories that were based around their tree home and around town. Well, a lot of that stuff had been designed, so the style was already created early on before the episode started. But then as the episodes began to be written, suddenly they're going to London, they're going to Asia, they're all over the world, right? And so based on how many of those were, you've got to get that done in about a 2.5 week period, and those designs. And so one couldn't do all of the 64 shows. So I would have another person that would be the world designer on the other 30, 64, 32 and 32. I would take 32 and they would take 32. And sometimes we would have help as well to come in and possibly, if need be, clean up maybe some of our work here and there. But it was always a challenge, and I learned how to work really fast. And but for me, for television animation, it's okay that work is acceptable. Okay, just acceptable, because there's so much work to do. But for me, I would never accept acceptable, and it needed to be as good as I could be at that time in my life. And so my objective was always to be uh, a feature theatrical designer. So if I'm producing what's acceptable, I'll never arrive there. So with all the work I did, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, well, hundreds and hundreds at least per show, per episode, per show, like Chippendale Rescue Rangers. And they had Tailspin, Goof Troop, Bonkers, Little Mermaid for television, Aladdin for television. I mean, so in about a 5-year period, there were just hundreds of different shows, which meant in every show there may be 5 or 6, 7, 8 to 10 locations I'd have to design. So we're talking about a lot of work. And I developed speed, and I developed, which I've slowed down over the years, the older I'm getting, but I developed good speed, and I learned really how to draw well. And something's got to be gained out of all that experience if you're really pushing and adamant to make it good, to make it beyond acceptable, beyond mediocre. I don't want to be mediocre. I want to be better than that. I want to be the best that I am. So that's always been the case. And sometimes even now, I'll work on a job a lot longer. Let's say if it's a freelance project, I'll work a whole lot longer on it than I'm getting paid. I just cannot let something out of my studio, let it go, unless I like it, unless I find, okay, it's as good as I can get this thing. And, so that's how I feel. I've always done that.
So let's do this, Michael. Then I love that background about the length of time on a television series, and over your career, you've had to learn how to draw well. And then there's also a standard for television that is different than feature, right?
Well, it has to be,
right,
because
right,
theatrical film demands a higher level of quality, right?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, and a lot more money is going to go into one theatrical film than an episode.
yeah,
One episode. But in order to get within a 2-year period, 65 episodes out the door, there's no way that most people are the company is going to expect you to arrive at excellence on everything.
yeah,
And there were times, I mean, on every show, I would select for myself, these are really going to be, as far as I can make, for me, masterful. I mean, I really want to give it all. And others, I have to find a clever way of creating it, simplifying it in a way that I can still have excellence in it, but it doesn't demand a lot of work. So those are ways you have to think about certain pictures, right? I mean, same way with,
yeah,
as an illustrator, you have to, have a simple approach to something and a more complex approach depending on your budget, right?
right,
Just to clarify something, and I think you agree that if you have $100 job, right, and you have a $10,000 job, or that's nice. But if you had a couple $1,000 job, you would obviously put more time and real effort into the $2,000 job, right? They would demand that. $100 job, you can't make it. You can't you can't invest the same time in the $100 job. Obviously, you're going to kill yourself in the long run. So, but you do have to have a style that's appealing for that style and beautiful for that style. I mean, if you don't create ugly for $100, you just don't. You'll never be called back. They want something, and they know for $100 that it's not going to be a Michelangelo masterpiece, right? But it's going to be something that's visually simple but elegant. There's got to be something about it that still has that beauty and that you respect.
right.
So
Yeah, I totally agree. And the only thing I don't agree with is that there are people who don't understand that $100 is not going to buy them what $2,000 will buy. Some people don't understand that, or they don't want to admit that that's the reality of the world.
yeah, right, of course, yeah, right.
And you got to suss them out. So let's talk a little bit about Hotel Transylvania too.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, the process of working on a feature like that, you had mentioned that it'd be about 2 years on an animated series. How
Yeah,
long on average do you work on a feature, and how long did you work on Transylvania 2 in particular?
it may have been about a year and a half, 2 years. Yeah, it depends on how often the story is changed, while we're developing the pre-production. Now, I'm in the pre-production phase of that's where I work. I don't work in production. Production is very complex and has a lot more talent of people that create. And what we're doing now is 3D animation, right? It's CGI, computer generated imagery, and so pre-production is where all the design, the story is wrapped up. The story artists uh, draw all their story panels to visually see that film laid out and timed, and then all the art, the design goes into an editing of all that as a package. That package is hand off to production, and production may at that point spend another year and a half getting it done before it ever hits the screen. So often I'll be on another project or one beyond that before the one I worked on 2 years ago comes gets on the screen. So so I'm in the pre-production phase. So just to say that I kind of lost my mind. I kind of lost my thought there.
Well, I was asking you about the amount of time that you spend
Okay, right.
generally on a project, and then what was Transylvania
Yeah,
2?
exactly. So again, it depends on whether things are changing in motion. So like on Smurfs, uh, most of the work I did on Smurfs never made it to the screen. Uh, they kept changing the story, and it seemed like over the last 3/4 of the last year in pre-production, it began that they had to nail that story. So then so much of that work was useless for this version of the story, right? So now we had to put a lot of energy. Okay, if that's it, they won't give us any more time. That has to be, you have to nail down that story. Once it's been nailed down, then all that energy. But if a story can be nailed down without changes right from the beginning, and that rarely happens, then it could be all the pre-production design work can be done a lot sooner. But in most cases, it takes around a year and a half, 2 years, because of the changes that are constantly taking place in story. So that's the time involved in most cases.
Okay,
That's all before going to production, and then
right.
it takes another year and a half, sometimes.
So then you are contacted by who made Hotel Transylvania 2?
Sony Pictures.
So Sony. So were you working with Sony at the time, or were you contacted and brought in on the project?
No, I came in 2013, working with Gendy Tartakovsky on Popeye. And it didn't. They shelved that, and Gendy ended up going to Hotel Transylvania. He already directed Hotel Transylvania 1, first one, and they wanted him. They said, "We'll let you do Popeye out there in the future. We want you to do this first." So after he
Well,
did,
and if I may, I've seen some of the test footage, I think is on YouTube or something, of
yes,
Popeye, and it's brilliant.
fantastic. It's
Yeah,
the little footage that they were able to complete. It's fantastic test footage, and it really is. So whenever he's able to get that thing back and to do it, that's kind of like contractually part of his. I demand to get back to that, but they keep
yeah.
throwing other things, I think, into his in front. And I don't know why. I think they'd make a lot of money, Popeye. I mean, it's internationally known and very, very well loved. So and especially with the success of that test footage, it's just brilliant. So yeah, Gendy Tartakovsky. I moved on into Hotel Transylvania too.
And so when they brought you onto the team, how big is that previs team?
From well, the story team. You're talking about just
Just
the
the visual. Well, I guess how many teams are there?
story is visual development to some
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah.
That's it's pre-visual visualizing what that story looks like for of course story. It's it's timing involved. Editing gets involved with story. They make these story reels, right? And the story ultimately goes to production once that story reel's nailed down, and it's the story is told visually.
Well, what's a story reel? Are you talking about a moving storyboard, an animatic?
Right, and animatic. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So
They
so
spend they spend a lot of time. I mean, constant revisions, story changes. It's hardly ever. It's a wonder it ever goes to production.
so you could be in the middle of working on something on Tuesday, and then end of the day you get direction that says, we're not going to do the big forest anymore. Now it's going to be in an aquarium, and we need to
Exactly.
get some concepts for the morning for the director or whoever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and those concepts won't be complete, finished, polished drawings. They'll be some idea sketches, rough
Yeah.
thumbnails, whatever you can get in front of the director, you know, and to talk about them, discuss them, and to get a little bit more of the director's mindset, of his vision for what that is.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have a director that comes in on a project that has a very difficult time committing to a vision. So that's the worst kind of director to have because everyone's kind of meandering, like, where are we going? If the director has a clear vision and can communicate that, then we're all on board and we know where we're going. But otherwise, it's very confusing. And sometimes this director will change their mind constantly. So you're doing a lot of wasted energy. The company doesn't like that. They hate wasted money, obviously, right?
So let me ask you this. When you're on that team, okay, and I'm talking now specifically about the visual development team, what does your mindset have to be in the process? So I know I talk to a lot of artists. I'm obviously an artist myself, and I find that the artists who tend to do well in in commercial business and in applied skills, you know, illustrative drawing, whatever the creative aspect is they do better if they play well with the team, right? As opposed to going, well, this is it and it has to look like this and I won't make it green, it's blue, it's blue. What's your mindset? Because you're creating a lot of work, like you said, for Smurfs that doesn't even see the screen. It's just
Well, I mean, when you're creating that art, you think it's going to feed the screen, right? I mean, not until either midway into it or you've done it, and then things change. So it never made us. Okay, that's fine. You just keep moving forward. Uh, One has to realize in a team that it's all a team, right? No one does this creates a film on their own. So everyone has to be a collaborative player. If you're not, I don't care. In this industry, it doesn't matter what or how talented you are. Well, that's relative. Adam Sandler is very talented, but he can do, but if it doesn't matter how talented you are, if you can't collaborate, if you're not a team player and you create problems, you're out. They can't afford to let someone frustrate the entire spirit of the team. You're just out. So you have to participate. And my role as a visual development artist, I'm not the director. I have to respect and often the director would always make their rounds. They would see once a week, they would see my art, where I was going with it, along with the production designer. And I had to understand, I had to learn what your thinking is prior to starting it, if it was possible. And well, I would get that from the production designer who would have already discussed it, that location design, let's say, with the director. So then now, if I trust that the production designer understands the vision of the director. So I'm working one-on-one with the production designer, who on this case was Mike Korinsky on Hotel Transylvania 2. And so we worked together on some of Popeye stuff. We worked together on some of other things, and we knew how to think. I mean, he always trusted me. So, but when I talked to Michael Korinsky, the production designer, I'm getting supposedly and should be the vision of the director. Then when the director comes in once a week and I show them my work. Either they do a walk around independently, looking over, at your shoulder at your work, or they have a screening where everyone's in there on the team and everyone sees everyone's work in progress, right? And so the director is immediately seeing and they respond right there. So either way works. The screening is nicer because everyone in the team gets to see where everyone is, right? And what they're working on and the progress of their work. So, it's important that I understand the vision and understand the details behind this location. If it's mentioned in the script, or if not, it's up to me to envision that as close as I can to the director's vision. Now, when I say the director's vision, this is necessarily say, oh, I'm looking for this eye level. I'm looking for this upshot. Nothing like that. He's talking about the sensibility. It's a moody. I want it to be, this is a moody area, or it's a dangerous area, or it's a friendly spot, or it's, it gives enough information for me to now be creative with it. And that's why they pay me to be creative, right? To come up with image that can, fit the visual language of the film. So I'm not creating Art Deco when they're into something else, right? So I'm leaning that way, and I'm leaning into the fluidity of the vision of the director's mindset.
So can we back up 1 second? So you go to, you said a crew screening, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the animatic.
No. This is from the animatic. A weekly or every other week crew screening would be the crew that's creating both character design, not story. The story's kind of separate. The director spends a whole lot more time with the story department than they do with the art department. Why? Because the art department has supposedly the right-hand man on his hip, the production designer. Now, ideally, the director should trust the production designer. The production designer knows my vision. He'll handle that. I have story I'm dealing with. The director's most important part of their job is to deal with the story team and the story and making sure that script is nailed down and the story visually is working, seeing what he wants to see on that screen. And Genndy Tartakovsky is very, very adamant about every shot on a story reel, and what that's actually doing, and whether the character is acting. And this is not even in animation yet, but sometimes story has to, really get that sense of what the acting moment is and the exaggeration of that gesture or something to communicate. Every shot communicates, right? And every scene communicates. So if a shot doesn't communicate, it's a dead part of that scene, right? So everything has to communicate. So the director's point is, this is what I want communicated in this shot and in this scene. We don't go anywhere until this scene, and it has to have context with the other scenes and the sequence. It's all one long story that has to work together. So
it's almost like writing the composition while you're orchestrating it.
Yeah,
If you were a composer and an or orchestral director, right? It's crazy. It's a
yeah,
crazy like you said, it's crazy that anything ever gets done.
of course.
But it's the crew screening then really helps you guys to have a holistic view visually of what is happening in the movie, or what is being developed for the movie. And then I'm certain that there are times where something will just jump out as perfect, or something will jump out as this just doesn't fit anymore, we need to get rid of that.
Sure. And the director usually, knows what they want. Now, Gendy Tartakovsky is very clear about what he wants. He's always been that. He's not confused. He really understands. He's been making a lot of films. He did a lot of television stuff, uh, and he's just a great director, to be honest. And uh, I know that he's not overly giving of compliments in screenings. I mean, or when you're showing works, you know, it would be nice to have a director that, because you do totally respect him, but to be there and saying, "Good job, Michael." If it works, he says, "Right, okay, next." I mean, there's no comment on it. It's working, right? But it would be nice. Good job,
Well,
Michael.
does that ever come at the end of everything?
Or thank you, Michael. It's
Yeah.
something, but it's just like trying to squeeze something out of him that's just not who he is. So,
Yeah.
uh, I remember they created a book on the making of Hotel Transylvania 2, and we were at a party, and a closing party for the film, and they gave everyone a book, right? So I asked Gendy to sign it, and what is it? And it'd be nice to say thank you, Michael, appreciate your effort, or whatever, right? And he goes blah blah blah, which was, what that means. In the movie, they would uh, uh, Drac. That was like blah blah blah. That he would use that term in relationship to the moment, and it's just like you read it, you go, couldn't you just give a little more than that? It's just like blah blah blah. You could barely read his signature. It's just like, okay, that's fine.
Well, and that's an interesting point to bring up, that you're not always going to get what your personality type desires from your coworkers or your boss.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly. Yeah,
You're a really social guy.
I am.
I'm a really social guy. I like when people are doing well, I like to encourage them in that way.
Yeah,
Some of us don't have that mix where however we were raised or whatever it is, we're just like, okay, the, the compliment of doing a good job is a job well done, period, right?
right.
And then
Yeah,
off you go. So but that's also to your point, and maybe to my point about when you're working with applied arts on a project, you are a component of the project. Your style is still your style, but you're trying to work a style along with everybody else. Just like everybody playing a Beethoven's Fifth and playing their part, nobody's going to stand out too much because it's Beethoven's. It's not second clarinet,
yeah,
right?
right.
And the second clarinet's going to have maybe some flourishes and moments, but you're trying to work with the team and satisfy the needs of the project. And it's not necessarily a time to shine in a way that is individualistic, right? Although I imagine if you're working on a piece, it's your job to interpret and to bring as much as you can to it, maybe even yourself to it, in a way that you're persuading the director that what you're creating is correct for his vision and the vision of the film.
Right. So this is something I always do. I can talk about my work. I've always been able to do that. An artist needs to have clear uh, explanation of what their intent is in this work. It's not just start and just whatever ends up being ends up. One can't create like that. Not for something that has to have a time limit on it, and you got to not get stuff out. Uh, you have to have what is your intention for this shot, for this drawing. And I've always been able to, which is over the years I've developed it, the ability to critique my own work and analyze it, and to tell someone why. If a director asks me any question about that art, I have an answer that's fully makes sense, why that's there, or why this is shallow space, or why this is out of focus, or why, or composition, I set that at a distance. And then many directors will say, great, I understand your thinking there. Okay, yeah, I like it. Or they may say, I understand, but let's make some changes. That's where, again, artists have to be compliable. They have to be able to take their work that's in progress, or even if after it's complete, revisions have to be done. I do a lot of my work traditionally, and I scan it in, and I digitize it, and I can now go back and strengthen it, values, or edit out certain things that are bothering me, or I have to make big changes. And so one has to learn and accept that. If you can't, there are a lot of students that I've taught for many years, and students fight with a teacher. A teacher might say, I might say, this would help this a lot if you would, and do a little sketch over, if you would, raise this, and I'll tell you why. Why am I telling you this? Always tell them why, and this is how it's going to strengthen this art. But they'll say, okay, but I like it. I like it the way it is. It's like, okay, fine. If that's the way you're going to, they'll never progress. And these are the kind of people that will not fit in the industry where a collaboration must take place. They don't want to collaborate. I like my work, and I don't want you to change it. All right. So it's very important that.
We've probably all been in meetings, even if not in school, right? Where you encounter that. It's worse when you encounter it in a professional space. It's so uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't know if you've encountered. I'm assuming you have.
Well, I mean, it happens, and if it happens too often, that they're not a team player, and you have to. Production designer is going to say, if you're not working with me, then I got to replace you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How good you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you find on your last check written blah blah blah, it's time to go. So Michael, you said that you always have an answer for everything in your illustration that you're working on. Where did that come from? Because I mean, I'm wondering. Well, I don't know that I want to say any more than that. Where did that come from?
Well, it comes from 1,000 drawings that you've done in the past. I mean, it can only come from that. It can only come from learning how to think, learning how to creatively make thousands and thousands of decisions, and they all have to go to somewhere. A decision has to move your image someplace. If you're not clear about what your intent is for this art, then none of your decisions make any sense. They only make sense when your decisions, whether it be a compositional decision, a spatial decision, a color decision, a shape decision, only if it fits your intended purpose for this image. Does it communicate what your intention is? And that's, a lot of people that create art have no clear intention. It just becomes what it is. And if you have a clear intention and you understand the decisions you made, you can explain why you do something. But if you don't have a clear intention, then it's either a successful piece or it's not, and you can't understand. You can't tell why it isn't successful because you had no reason. You didn't have a clear motive from moving into it.
Well,
So
and that's a great explanation, because you don't want to be the person on the team who can't explain why you're making the decisions you made.
right, right. Well, decision, yeah, explanation and critiquing your own work and being able to look at it and tell why, uh, why you made these decisions. That shows a mature artist from one that's not,
Right.
clearly.
Yeah.
And I often in teaching, I'll ask, what was your motive behind this? Where are you going with this? What was your intended purpose? And they just, they don't know what to say because they didn't make that. And that's why when I teach my compositional classes, right up front in the lecture, I say, I talk about creative intention. If you don't have a creative intention, how can you compose based on nothing? You have to have a mind about where you're going. Then all your decisions about how you put and what you do within that composition make sense because they harmonize. Every decision works to arrive at what your original intent was. Does it communicate that? And if you don't have that intention, how do you know if it's communicating anything? I mean, what is it communicating? It may be ambiguous because you're not clear. And if you're not clear about something, ambiguity slips in very quickly. And you may not see it, but the viewer sees it. They're not quite clear about what they're supposed to be looking at or understand what the image is communicating to them. They don't look at a picture like that long because it's too confusing and they move on. So the more control you have by being clear about what you want to say. Listen, the artwork takes an enormous amount of time and energy. Why waste it if you don't know what you want to say?
Right. Right.
It's simple. And so I tell them in my lecture, I don't do this all the time, but I'll have at least some kind of mental note. I know where I'm going with this, and I can hang on to it because of all my experience. But listen, sometimes I do have to write out notes. This is what I want to see. This is where I'm going with the overall picture. I need to, and I start working out my intention for that piece. Now, and I try to stay on track because sometimes I go back to my notes and reread them, and I look at my piece. Okay, yeah, I'm off tracks here somewhere. I have to bring it back on to track.
Yeah. Well, and so let's take a look at a couple of pieces here from Hotel Transylvania 2 that you worked on. And I think the first one at the top of the page here is Dennis's bedroom concept with bed revision. And there's a lot going on in this piece, in this kid's room.
Uh-huh.
Tell me about it. How did you start and how did you end up here?
Well, I start with like in any drawing, which is part of my compositional lecture. There's got to be a point where you don't just jump into this big drawing. Again, there's a lot of decisions you have to make. So you do thumbnails, small little thumbnails, not large. The more large it is, the more work involved. Keep it small, keep it loose. You're creating your thinking on those thumbnails. That's all you're doing. So I'm thinking, well, what's the best shot I want for this? That will give modelers, this is going to be 3D, give modelers an idea of what they're clearly seeing in this room. Now, I also did a reverse view. Now, my reverse view was not as flushed out. It had the parts, but it didn't have the tone. I didn't need it. My tone was established here. I was telling the modelers, and the lighters and everyone that's going to touch this art in production, that's going to reinterpret it in production, of the mood of this, right? So, and again, maybe the director later decided, I want to make sure that since this is black and white, uh, there's a painter that comes in and paints this always. I don't paint, I draw and paint. I conceptualize, the hard work is on the front end, and the painter certainly does their hard work, but they don't have to create what I have to create. They have to create decisions about how they handle that color. And that color mood will be directed by the director and the production designer. So again, they interpret, the modelers get a very clear black and white image, and the painters come in and they get, the lighters also get a handsome color. So now the director may change those colors, may lean it more cool, may lean it more warm, may say, interpret, now this light that's coming in the window here is definitely going to be moonlight, not daylight. It's not going to be daylight. So again, it sets the mood a little differently, right? It cools down everything, opposed to having some warmth in the room. So these decisions will be made later. I'm establishing enough lighted space, and light in a room, light adds definition to form. It adds clarity to what you're looking at. If there's no light, you're looking at blackness, first of all. A little light, wherever it's created, will begin to reveal forms. So I have to have some light. So in saying that, this piece is, I had to think about the kid's age, Dennis's age. He's 6 years old. He has his birthday that year, and there was a birthday party in the film. He turns 6 years old. I think it's 6, as I recall. And I'm thinking, what has he collected up to this point? These are a collection of things that, a kid's room would possibly have. Again, I often think back on my youth. Now, toys have changed, yes. I'll often have a lot of traditional sensibility about some of the toys because they have so much character for me than sometimes modern toys. So in this case, we're talking about Hotel Transylvania. They haven't been, the Drac has not been out of the hotel for over 200 years. Okay, so we're talking about stuff that have been collected. I want a sense of history. So I had to create a room that would fit into the hotel, the castle, Hotel Transylvania, or it's a castle. And I created some architectural sensibility that would match up with the rest of the hotel. And you get that through the doors and the window treatment above the windows and the curtains, let's say, and etc. But a lot of things are now, toys that were purchased somehow for Dennis since Dennis's birth. And so there may be collectible old toys and new toys. Now the bed you see is a race car bed, right? So I created a traditional bed, and I talked to the director, and the director said, I'd kind of like to see kind of a race car bed, one of those red cars, and in color it becomes red. So I said, sure. So I go back and I revise this. Again, that part of the drawing is not a traditional piece. It's now digital, right? Now I may have drawn it traditionally over a copy of my art and then scanned it and then put it in place and then painted tonality into it. So that's what I did. It was a place piece there. The rest of it, most of it is the little train set at the bottom, the actual set there, very complex. That was not in my original drawing. I needed that little element to be a lot larger, drawing it, than what it would have been in my drawing. So my drawing might be, if you look at me here, John, it may be about this, a drawing about this wide, right? 18 inches wide or something. And because the bigger the drawing, the more labor. I just you have, especially since I'm toning it. I got a lot of tonal. So if I can draw something around this size with this kind of complexity in it, I'm doing well. If there's a whole lot less complexity, it's more simpler, I can do it smaller. Okay, so, but that train set required, that central area there required a lot of detail. So I did another drawing, I toned it traditionally, and then I scanned it, and I took that art, dropped it in here. See, a lot of things are a piecemeal. You create the essence of the original environment, and then you have to sometimes add in more complex things that you can't get in the original drawing.
Right.
So it's a process. It's a process.
So now you're in Photoshop.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you always start with pencil and paper?
Yeah, I do. I think better with pencil and sketching. My mind just thinks better like that.
Yeah. Yeah, because it looks like the race car might have been more digital.
Yeah, it was. You can see the treatment on it is different. But again, it works well in this image.
Sure.
Polished and whatever. Ideally, I would have liked it to have been everything there to have been on one drawing, because I keep my own drawings. The studios don't care about your drawings. They care about the digital image, because that's the asset that goes to production. So I have all my, since 3D happened, prior to 3D, most studios required that you give up all your drawing. Disney, all those Disney projects, Disney feature, almost everything went to them, and they have it in their archives. But since 3D animation, I have been able to I just have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drawings. And a lot of my drawings are piecemeal little pieces, like things that were dropped into. They're still a little drawing. They're still a drawing, right?
Yeah.
I keep everything, and I keep my roughs, because my roughs are supporting in teaching. I'll show my final. Now here are a lot of my rough ideas before arriving here, or my roughs. Because to start this, even though my thumbnail are clear about my point of view, my eye level, and all that, and what portion of that room I'm going to draw, I'm clear about that through my thumbnails. Then when I get in, I still have to now start drawing, and my first 2 or 3 drawings are going to be rough. They're organic, and I've got to feel it out where things are and spatially and all that. And this is why I work on vellum or tracing paper, so I can see through my work, right?
Yeah.
So I can put a tracing over it, tracing paper over it, and make revisions, and then slip it under that, and then erase out. Or I'm versatile that way.
Yeah.
That you're working on
old school real life layers. I'm going to add a layer, except it's vellum. Yeah.
So
that's the way to do it. That's awesome. So can I move to another drawing? Is there anything more you want to say about the bedroom?
No, I think that there's a lot of visual interest in it.
Yeah.
And that was important. The dentist didn't have a dull bedroom, right? Children's rooms are generally full of toys, right?
Right.
And I have a variety of sizes of toys. You see the big bear stuck in the corner back there, things hanging from the ceilings, that kind of thing. That's so beautiful. Now, if the director said, these toys are yesteryear toys, I would have said yes. That's kind of like I kind of lean on my own history, right? So and I create toys. I sometimes I'll get some reference, but I try to make it what I remember of the toy. So they're generalized kind of toys with a little detail and definition, but it's always the size and the scale that keeps it as a toy.
Yeah.
So and a little polish here, can be a plastic or it can be a metal or whatever. But and then okay, I have all this thinking about some toys. Now I can't throw every toy in the world in there, so I have to be, I have to contain, or I have to collect toys here, and then scatter them here and there without it becoming too busy. So your eye's not being
Right.
distracted. So I organize them in a way where ultimately, in this picture, I want the eye to move back to the bed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
everything points to the bed.
yeah, yeah.
I
And
mean, everything's going that way. It's beautiful.
the converging lines go back to the bed of the
Yeah.
room itself. So you're going there one way or the other. And it's what's important is that you don't organize elements in the picture that always pull you away from or distracting you from moving gently toward the rear.
Right.
Now, so if I would want everything just to go to the rear immediately, I wouldn't have had the complex train set in the front. That draws some attention there. And you want to go there and enjoy it, but then when you're finished enjoying it, you move on around to the right and then in toward the bed. Everything has a control. I mean, uh, you know, uh, there things are dominant and subordinate. You're always working with dominant and subordinates. What's
Right.
the most dominant thing in the picture? That very well be the center of interest. If it's most dominant and it's not the center of interest, then then your audience will have a hard time getting to the center of interest.
Right.
So dominant, and then everything else has to be supportive or subordinate to that. They play a lesser role, but they are still important in the overall story of the room.
Right. Yeah. I had years ago, I was working with a sculptor, and my world is much more character or object. I'm not a world designer, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm interested in the wrinkles around the eyes and what makes the expression just so. And if I'm working on a toy, um, it's still the same rules, because if you make the whole toy busy, or if you're making a rock character who's built out of rocks, right? Some monster,
Yeah.
you've got to have interest in the body to give it form, and you have to decide, is it going to be anthropomorphized so that it's some kind of humanoid creature, and then we need some sense of where the eyes are generally if it's a kid's toy, right? So you have things that are less important and things that are more important, and then you've got to give the eye a place to rest in between the detail, because if you don't, you just lose interest.
Yeah, it's exhausting. It
It
becomes
is.
exhausting, tiring.
It is. So let me take you to the Death Espresso machine. So tell me how that came about and how you developed the look of this.
Uh, well, let me go to it just so I can look at it again.
Sure. It's brilliant. It makes me smile when I see it.
Good, good. Uh, yeah. Well, again, it belonged in. Let me think. One of the rooms, and it was on the cupboard, and now everything had to fit. Uh, the Hotel Transylvania, the old ancient castle, and so if they're going to have a death or an espresso machine, it had to be something really old. Okay, they hardly ever had new anything. So and of course it's a monster world. So they would either create or purchase. I'm not sure what the backstory is, what that would have been, but the idea is that it has to fit that world, and it has to have entertainment. It has to have visual entertainment because it will be. Was it ever used in the movie? It may have been, but sometimes you do things that they never make it. One reason or another, they cut it out. They intended it, but they cut it out because of timing. They got to get the movie wrapped up, right? So within a certain time, and the more time over a certain time, that's big money. Okay,
Right.
so for to produce it. Now it had to have something that had some animation possibility to it. It wasn't just a dead, a still object, and had personality. So, the eyes would probably move. The mouth may contract a little bit without closing. And showing a kind of an effort at producing that espresso.
Yeah.
You can see it and hear it, and the steam shooting out and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I thought it ended up being very clever. So they really liked it. Yeah, I think even Gendy maybe commented on how much he enjoyed it. I sure hope. I can't remember. Maybe he did make it in
Let's
the.
just say he did. He said it was fantastic.
Okay.
I love it. I love the character of it. Right. I'm a character guy, right?
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
I love the character of it. I love even, I hadn't really noticed this before, but in the eyes, where the eyes of the skull would be, or the sockets of the skull, you've even got a little bit of an eye going where some of the dials would be.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
it's just very clever how you've worked it all together, and it looks like iron, and it looks cast, and it looks like something you wouldn't want to go get an espresso from unless you were a monster,
yeah,
right? It fits
exactly.
that world. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
So next to that you have the laboratory. And if I may, before you say anything about this, um, it harkens back to the classic monster movies, right? The old
yes,
Universal stuff. Absolutely gorgeous. And I
yeah.
love
Young
I
Frank,
love
young.
young Frankenstein, right? And I love the angle you're at. It's very busy, and then it's not. You've got this great big space that allows your eyes to rest. You can cast a big shadow of a character on that wall if you want, if they're coming into the scene. It's
Sure.
just, there's so much about it that harkens back to that early Universal classic monsters. And there's a retro feel to some of it too,
Oh,
where it's
sir.
it's
Yeah.
kitschy. So now you, sir.
Well, yeah, certainly it's retro because again, it has to fit this old castle, right? Anything high tech, it can't have anything Star Trek or
Right,
or Star Wars. Nothing of that
right,
sensibility. Everything has to be retro, early industrial age, that kind of thing, right? And I mean, it's a classic feel for a science laboratory, right? So, yeah, I mean, even the bricks on the wall and the backside, they're not just flat, they're angled and they're coming in toward the action of all of the details, right?
right,
They have it's a rounded room, right? It's a
right.
cylindrical room, and so yeah,
And
and
I love the plugs and the sockets. I'm assuming that the plugs are enormous, is how they look.
yeah, right, of course,
Yeah,
it's just exaggeration. It's just everything here could have, unless it didn't work with animation, have a sense of it's fun. And usually fun exaggeration ends up being fun to look at because we
and
don't live with that kind of scale.
right.
Now, the next one, it was painted by my friend Miguel Gil, and uh, so he's the one that finally painted it, and I have credit to him at the bottom right. So
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I even like that the one socket on the wall by all the plugs that doesn't have a plug in it. It just strikes me as a simple ghostly face, or almost like an emoji that's a little bit shocked.
yeah.
Like, oh, there's even character in that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's lovely. Did you go back to Frankenstein in particular to the movie, or how did you come up with all the bits and pieces?
Yeah, I'm sure. What I do is I try to absorb, hit myself with as much reference. I usually spend far too much dragging reference images. I never have enough, right? And then I have to edit through and think, what are the strongest pieces here? And I'll only work with getting an impression or influenced by the very best. And I recognize I just wasted 2 hours pulling stuff off that I didn't need. So that's just the way it is. It's a crazy, crazy world. And
By the way, at what point do you show the director or the production designer your concepts? How rough will you show them things?
well, certainly the production designer, uh, if he thinks that, yeah, this is going to fall right in line with the vision of the director, he'll just say from a sketch, that's great. Go with that. I like that. And I just do it. I mean, yeah, if you're working on the show for quite a while, you have a lot of confidence that what you're doing is working. And it's fitting. Again, if the director comes in and has a comment and a revision, you just do it. But it's not like none of that works. Usually that doesn't work. Okay, so. And if it does, and that happens too many times, you're thinking, I'm not making a connection with the vision of the director here. So again, you have the more closer relationship with the production designer. You'll often go in there, I'll start something, thumbnails and some compositional ideas, just a sense for it being complex. I mean, no really
Right.
definition to it, but you get the idea what it is. And and before I really start, I might call like Mike Krinsky and say he was like, a room next to mine. And go, hey, Mike, are you available? Yeah, I'll walk in there, and or can you come in here or whatever? 'Cause I have it on my screen. Scroll in. Yeah. That's great. I love these. Okay, just let's go for it. It's like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you really can't make much of a mistake here. As long as it's feeling that way, uh, then I think it was a very quick shot too in the movie. They didn't spend a lot of time there. So as I recall,
Let's go to the
actually, the time it took you to make it was a lot more time than what it was on the screen. So you're wondering, I hope someone is not looking down at their popcorn when this came on the screen because they never saw it.
right. And then let's go to the hotel fang measurer.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
It's
Yeah,
it's obviously a riff on
of course.
a micrometer,
Yeah,
right?
and I took
And
that from reference. Man, I grabbed some really nice high definition, if I could find it, actual tool, and then I began to revise that tool, and cut and stretch or this or that. I mean, why not? I mean, it gets it clear. It gets it clear for the modeling department than I just trying to artificially create those surfaces.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
We
gorgeous.
see in the, or I'm sorry, we see Drac always interested in whether Dennis is showing any monster, is showing any fangs coming out in his teeth, and he wants him to be monster opposed to a human. His father's human, his daughter is a monster. So the mother is a Dracula, a part of being a Dracula, or and so uh, uh, he's oh, I pray that he's more my daughter than my son-in-law, and he's always checking his mouth, pulls out from the back pocket, pulls this thing out and is checking in his mouth, and the daughter would say, Dad, stop that, stop that. If he gets fangs, he gets them. If he doesn't, you have to accept it.
Awesome. And then, I'm gonna let you pick one last image here, just to look over and share your thoughts on it. Something that maybe I wouldn't even think to ask about.
Okay, open the three, the black and white, the guillotine, toy guillotine. I started with a black and white,
Yeah.
and then I think that maybe the director or Mike Krinsky thought, why don't we make it a little bit newer? Okay, because it's going to be a birthday gift. So it's the color version is you can see the revision from the black and white drawing I did. So I basically created this color version, and then I had to create a gift box, and the box was a real more challenging piece of art. So I dropped the color version into the front side of this guillotine box, toy guillotine box, and all the stuff that's on that box was so funny. And I went to reference on plastic, clear plastic boxes that were gift boxes, for toys or whatever. And I basically, created this, and I love what it says. Now there's a hole in this plastic in the center one, and you were to, you can even try it. And this is an actual guillotine. It's toy size, but it's an actual. They bought this because a monster. I mean, it was Frankenstein that ended up buying this for Dennis, and I just can't think of her name now. Drek's daughter pulled it aside and said, "No, no, no, not now, Dad. No, not now, Frankie. You know, I, you know, he ended up putting his finger in it and chopped his finger off. He said, "See, it works. It works." He just took the fingertip and put it back on his body. But she was afraid that it would, obviously just hurt Dennis's finger. But it was funny. It was, it's a real kind of funny gag, and so yeah.
And what's so good about it is from my toy design background, I can't tell you the number of Try Me packages I've designed, because that's a big positive, for somebody at the store to be able to try something. It gets the product in people's hands. It gets them to either fall in love with something or not, and actually at the store it gets them to break it a lot of the time. And then I love the colors. I mean, you've done that, the primary with the green. You got that supplementary green in there, or complementary green. And then the wood, of course, they always use the pine with the little kids. So it looks like something right out of
Tinker Toys or something,
Yeah, or what's Hasbro's
Yeah.
Hasbro's toy company? I can't think of right now. Anyway, for little kids. And it's really well done. It almost feels like you and I were working alongside each other on a toy project. That's how much you've caught that aspect of the design. So yeah, really, really cool, Michael. So yeah, thank you.
Well, even you notice that, considering where that center that the guillotine is inside the package.
Yeah.
If you look at the left side, that's the true color of the real bright, colorful toy with primary colors. Now, once it's in the package, it's within that darker space, and you have to look through that cellophane, right? And so colors are muted, right? They're knocked back.
Right.
And they're knocked back, so the cellophane can be clearly understood, and the information that's in front of it, the try me and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, all the violators. Yeah, that's great. So let me ask you this. You complete all this work. You've worked on this for 1.5 years, 2 years, and then it's done and you're off to another project, right? Ideally.
Yeah.
How long between the time you're done and the film actually hits the theaters?
Well, sometimes it depends on how long the production team takes to finish it. I mean, that's the most complex part of the whole thing. I mean, what we do in terms, we put a lot of creative thought in all this, but the production team has to, from modeling to lighting to texturing to animation of all the characters, and it's just very, and it's amazing how much 3D animation has come to arrive at such a masterful play style than when we first saw the early, especially with the humans. They were very awkward looking. The timing, the movement was not quite right. But now they're so good at it, and it's amazing. So, but the time it takes for them to produce it, and they're under deadlines too. They're under a lot of pressure to get that thing because they've already committed to the release date. That's the problem. They don't finish it and then look for a release date. They use the release date to help put pressure on the team to get the darn thing done. Otherwise, you might drag it out forever.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that forces you to adjust your standards, right, for everything you're doing in a film or any project. It's like, the timeline's running out. We got to get it done.
Right. Uh, so, and again, that's where a director or even the supervisors for the different departments have to be very clever and creative. They only have so much time, okay, and they only have so much budget. So they'll take the very short shots, moments, and they won't put as much investment into that. It's not necessary. It has very little screen time. You wouldn't know it. But the longer the screen time, the more money you have to put in it, right? So everything about that has to be matured and beautiful if it has long screen time.
Right. Right.
So that's how clever they have to be. Otherwise they can't make a short 2 second, 3 second shot on the screen as elaborate as in terms of all of the beauty they have to put into a longer screenshot. And
nor should they. It would be silly.
Of course, just like what we were talking about, our freelance illustration, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a $100 job opposed to a $2,000 job.
Right.
You can't. You have to find a way of solving this and making it work within that moment, and don't go beyond that. It's a waste of your energy.
Right.
And
So, Michael, in closing, first off, I want to thank you again for walking us through that. There was so much incredible, insightful information in there. And you're one of my best friends. I love you. I'm grateful for you. And I'm just wondering, um, how satisfying is it to see a project all the way through from beginning to end, at least for your part, to start designing, because there's that first day with papers all fresh, you smell the lead, dust falling off the pencil as you're furiously working on things, and then you submit that last piece of art and you know that you're now done with this particular project. And then to go and see it on the screen, and maybe there's a substantial amount of your work in it, maybe there's little bits and pieces in there, or you can see generations of your work in there, right, where something you can, oh, I know where that came from, I know where that came from. How is that experience for you, even after all these years?
well, it's rewarding to see it, once it made it to the screen. My family is usually with me. Early on, it would be I, like maybe sometime I would want to stand up in the middle of the theater. It's like, I did that, I designed this. No one understands that, What do you mean
Right.
you designed it? I don't get it.
Yeah.
So, but or when we see it, we may applaud in the middle of the production, or something like that, or at the end of the credits, when it's coming up to visual development, the small team, and a very small team compared to the production team, right? I mean, production goes on forever, and so when that comes up, and they scroll slowly, and it's nice when they scroll slowly, and that often my entire family, all of us would stand up and just applaud. It's fun. It's like a party. But again, you got to go back Monday to the job you're working on now, and it's just, bear in mind, all this is just a cartoon. Now, I'm not minimizing the value of it. They go down in history, and they go down. They have their own value in the marketplace and all of that. And you never know what's going to be a real hit and what's not going to be. If it's not, it's not. You just, can't control that.
Yeah.
I wish I had left um, uh, the project for Warner Brothers that I was working on, uh, and at the time, and worked on Iron Giant. I wish I'd had the opportunity because it was like right there if I had decided to move from one project.
Wow.
And one never knows.
Right.
Iron Giant certainly did not do well in the box office.
Right.
Was not promoted well. Was not given a great budget. But it became a classic, and it would have been fun to have had worked on it. But
Yeah,
sometimes
that's a beautiful movie.
sometimes or you try to get on a project and they've got their team already pulled together, or or they just feel like this selection of talent is right, and you may not be right for that project.
Right.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's good. That's
but
good.
I encourage anyone that's listening, go to my website and enjoy my work. It's there, and I'm proud of it. And it's a very attractive website. A lot of people don't have a website quite as attractive. It's amazing. My wife and I did all this by ourselves.
Yeah.
And we would wait, in developing it, we would wait sometimes 3 and 4 weeks between getting back on it. And we thought, how did we do that again? I don't remember how. We would be totally lost. But Beverly's a great tech. I'm not a good tech at all. I'm a terrible tech. But Beverly is able to. She's a pretty good tech, but her best skill is, I'll find a way. It's got to work. She works around corners, and she'll do things that aren't even offered in the software. I mean, she will. She'll try these things, man, and it works. It's like, there you go.
That's awesome. She's got a lot of grit.
I applaud my wife. And none of this, I wouldn't even have a website. I would have had to pay for a website if it for Beverly. She's such a better part of me. I can't tell you. My marriage to her is the absolute God's blessing in my life. And you can release that on this video, because listen, our lives mean a lot. I'm not just an artist, I'm a person. I love God and I love my wife. She's a gift from God. We've been married 33 years, and so she's the greatest art. Not this stuff here means nothing. Matter of fact, I've done a lot of school visits, college, universities, and I'll talk about my work. And the first time I show my work, I show a history of who I am and whatever. And at the very end, after showing all this work, at the very end, I say, now I put off to the very end my very best work of my life. And everyone's going, oh my gosh, what does it look like? And because, most of my work is quite good, and they're impressed with that. But you're saying this is even better? They can't wait. And then I open a picture of my wife and my son, and one uniquely of my wife, one uniquely of my son. And I said, this. Matter of fact, I prep it with, before I show them, I said, I would take all of the work I've ever done in my life, put it in a pile and burn it, compared to what I'm going to show you today.
Yeah.
No. And I would show them that. And I say, they are the greatest art in my life. They are the greatest thing in my life. Nothing compares to them. And I turn to and I'm looking at the audience. I say, my blessing for you is that you find someone to love, and if you desire children, to create a family and love them, because they will make life meaningful for you.
Yep.
This other jobs, none of it compares It will always be. I trust you will always find that it is second place, even though sometimes you do spend a lot more time on it than with your own family. But I want you to know your heart needs to be with your family.
Yeah,
So, yeah, and
that's
it is
awesome.
really an impression. Young people need to hear that even
Yeah.
before going into your career. It's you need to hear these things. What's most important in a career? It's not your artwork. Yeah, it's important. In those jobs, you better believe it's important. But what's more important is a relationship with someone that loves you.
So, well, on that note, thanks for being my guest, my friend. I appreciate you so much. I love you, man.
I love you too, my friend.
Man, I just love Michael. I know it was a bit of a love fest today. He's such a great guy. He's genuine. He's exactly who you see and hear uh, in this interview. I really, really love uh, how he spoke about standards and how there's a different standard in TV animation than there is in feature film animation. And it has to do with budgets and it has to do with expectations. And we need to be aware of that in our own business, that there's a difference between a $200 job and a $2,000 job and a $25 million job, right? Expectations are different, so we have to raise and lower our standards to do work commensurate with what the job calls for. Um, I love how Michael talks about working on a team, that you have to be flexible, that you need to bring your best, but you also need to be malleable and work for the director to help him bring his vision to life. Certainly, you can help to supplement, and that's what you should be doing, the vision of the director. But you can't be subversive and be disagreeable, because it doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't help the cause, and at some point you're going to find yourself out of work, and you're also probably going to be labeled with somebody who's just too disagreeable and difficult to work with. And that is not good. You don't want to be that person. And then finally, I have two finallys, I guess. I really appreciate how Michael broke his scenes down and just shared all of his thoughts on those scenes and props, actually, and settings and whatnot. And I love what he has to say about his wife and his son. You know, work is awesome. It's fun to create things. If you don't have anybody to share them with, I don't know that that's the best way to live a life. But, you know, we all have to make our own decisions. I know my life is richer because of my family and my friends. And life is meant to be shared with those that we love. So, there you have it. A very touchy-feely ending to this episode. And while I'm at it, I love you, and I hope that you have a spectacular week. And I hope that you get busy about the business of doing whatever it is that you need to do next in your journey of your career to make a living from your art. All right? On behalf of the Breakthrough Creative, I'm your host, John McDavitt, and I will see you next time. Cheers.